So good morning, welcome. So this is the seventh in the 8-part series, which means that we start the teaching for the person of the highest scope, or the universal vehicle, also in Sanskrit known as the Mahayana. So the Mahayana teachings are specifically for leading a person to accomplish the full scope of the path to enlightenment, which is to become a Buddha. And in order to become a Buddha, and you have to have a certain mindset to do that. Otherwise, you can be engaged in the practices that a bodhisattva is engaged in. A bodhisattva is a person who is dedicated to become a Buddha. But you can be engaged in those practices and still only achieve the state of personal liberation, which is the goal of the person of the intermediate scope. So that mindset is composed of altruism. So it's a person who regards others' welfare as more important than their own, and recognizes that in order to accomplish the goal of altruism, which is to bring all beings to happiness, then one has to become a fully enlightened being, because that's the only type of person who has the ability to accomplish such a magnificent objective. And thus one generates this aspiration to become fully enlightened for the benefit of all living beings. And that aspiration is what is known as bodhicitta, or the spirit of enlightenment. So the doorway into the Mahayana, or the universal vehicle, is to cultivate the bodhicitta. And there's two stages of that development. One is called the aspirational stage, and the other is the engagement stage. And the difference between the two is like setting a wish to achieve a destination, and the second is engaged in the actual trip to take you to that destination. So the aspirational bodhicitta is something that is cultivated through training the mind. And there are two main meditations or ways of thinking that can achieve that. Either one is suitable, but generally both are taught, and practitioners practice both of them. And it just depends upon whatever fits your mind the best ends up being something that you make use of. But I tend to find that one makes use of the ideas that are cultivated in both methods. And the one method is called the exchanging self with others. And the tradition of that method comes from the Bodhisattva disciple of the Buddha called Manjusri. And the great Indian practitioner Shantideva, in his book, the Engaging in the Practices of the Bodhisattva, is the principal source for that method. And then the other method of the 7-point cause and effect method, that was learned by the Indian master Atisha, and he went to Sumatra to learn that method from a master there. And so he brought that method into Tibet. Now, both methods incorporate a state of mind known as equanimity. And equanimity has different meanings depending upon the context. Even within the Buddhist teachings, it can have very different meanings. But when it's referred to here as a foundation for cultivating either of these two methods for developing bodhicitta, the equanimity that is made use of is the same equanimity that we find in the four immeasurables. The four immeasurables are a meditation technique that is used both by Buddhists and non-Buddhists, and it can lead one even to very high rebirths in the form realm. But there is limitless equanimity, limitless loving kindness, limitless compassion, and limitless joyfulness or rejoicing. So the limitless, they're called limitless because they're referring to limitless living beings. And limitless equanimity, so it has the scope encompassing all living beings. And the equanimity that's involved here is a state of mind where you have an equal attitude towards all beings, which is described as an attitude that is neither attached to some, or having aversion to others, or having indifference to the rest. So it's free from those three negative states of mind. And there's different ways of cultivating it, but it's the way in which it's taught in the tradition depends upon having some conviction in the continuity of mind, which means, like having past lifetimes and future lifetimes like that. So it's easier to cultivate equanimity if one understands that one has taken rebirth numerous times, and as a consequence, one has had all kinds of relationships with anyone whom you might meet. So the way in which one would contemplate this is that you would imagine, one way of doing this is you would imagine, for instance, all of your, let's say, friends would be on one side, all of your enemies on the other side, and all the strangers whom you don't feel any particular either aversion or attraction to in front of you. And you can move these three groups around. It doesn't matter. And what an enemy is, of course, would be somebody whom you generate a kind of aversion or anger or hatred towards, because you perceive them as somehow interfering with your work to achieve happiness, somebody who's actually causing you pain, somebody who's hurting your friends, somebody who's benefiting your enemies, like that. And the ones whom you're attracted to, you can be attracted to them by how they appear to your senses, or that they have benefited you, benefited your friends, things like that. And we view here all living beings in human form, but as you cultivate this attitude, then you can substitute, whether they're human or non-human, animals, insects, whatever. But when you start off with, you would view them all living beings in human form. And so you might start off with friends. And you would view your friends, well, you're my friends because of, and then you might choose somebody who's your friend and think, okay, you're my friend because why? Because we've had good times together, you've supported me in different things, different ways. And then think, well, is this permanent? I can always rely upon you to be a support and to be my benefactor, to be somebody whom I get along with, and so on? Or could that change? And then you would think about, well, have I ever had similar circumstances in the past with somebody who was my friend, but then things changed, and then we no longer got along, or it might have even been worse. I couldn't wait to get away, like that. So by contemplating that, you see that these relationships are subject to change. And it may not even be necessarily a change that's brought on by some change in the other person. It could be a change that's brought on by oneself. And because one's own views change, one's desires change, one's needs change, then the other person ceases to relate to oneself, to help one accomplish one's goals, and in fact they might hinder one to accomplish one's goals and so on, or they might be upset because you've changed and then end up hurting you, like that. So this is something that's easy to change. These relationships are often based upon just relative things that what oneself likes, another person doesn't necessarily like. What one likes at one time can change and become something that later one dislikes. It's all very changeable. And then when you add the dimension of former lifetimes to that, then it's possible to imagine, yeah, well, we may have had bad relationships in some other lifetime, and it could have been really bad. Like in some former lifetime, you might have even killed me. And if that was possible in one lifetime, it could have happened innumerable lifetimes. And so right now, things are nice, but who knows how long that's going to last. And so then you move over to the current enemy and think that, well, why is this person my enemy right now? Due to circumstances, perhaps, that the person has interferes with what I want. This person doesn't like me for some reason. Who knows? But is this a permanent situation? Is this something that is possible to change? Have I ever had the experience of interacting with someone who initially the interaction was unfavorable? I didn't like it, but then it improved, and the person became a friend. And this could have been not only due to a change in the other person, but it could have been due to a change in myself. And if that has happened in this life, then it could have happened in many lifetimes. And similarly with the person that I'm looking at right now, who we have a bad relationship, but in the past, we may have had very positive relationships. We could have had the best of friends. And for many lifetimes that could have been, but due to the current temporary circumstances right now, there's this antagonism that is present. But that's not something that is reliable because it's subject to change. And then you go to some stranger, somebody whom you've seen but you have no relationship with, and somebody you might see in a grocery store but you have no particular connection to, and that person is a stranger to you right now. But how confident can you be that would always be the same? Isn't it that every person whom you either have attraction to or aversion from, they were once strangers, and then you interact, and then something else new happens besides them having this relationship as a stranger to you. And it can go very easily, very quickly, in fact. Like, for instance, you can pass somebody on the sidewalk, and you hear somebody calling towards you, and you turn around and they say, "Is this your wallet? You appear to have dropped it." All of a sudden, in a second, they're your best friend. So this is something that's very changeable. And similarly, in former lifetimes, the person could have been one's greatest of friends, they could have been one's worst of enemies. It's all very changeable, this kind of these interactions that we have with people, these relationships that we have with people. So you start viewing these three in that way, so that you move from the friend who could have been the enemy, you move from the enemy who could have been the friend, you move to the stranger who could have been either friend or enemy. You go back to the friend, they could have been a stranger. You go to the enemy, they could have been the stranger. You go to the stranger, they could have been friend or enemy. You go back to the enemy, which is the enemy now and could be the enemy in the future, was the enemy in the past. You go to the friend, which is the friend now, was the friend in the past, could be the friend in the future. You go to the stranger, was the friend and enemy and stranger in the past, and right now is the stranger in the present, could be the stranger in the future. And you start moving around these three groups until it becomes very fluid, and you start seeing them all as the same, because the view of regarding someone as a friend, enemy, or stranger is fluid. It's based upon changing circumstances and can be easily replaced by an attitude that views, instead of the enemy, view them as stranger, instead of the strangers, a friend, instead of a friend, an enemy, and so on and so forth. And a kind of higher view arises where one starts to view them as all equal, as all the same, and based upon the fact that these relationships are impermanent, are changing all the time, and that the identity of being a friend or being an enemy or being a stranger is not something that inheres inside each of these persons. For if it inhered in them from the side of the object, existed as some permanent characteristic within them, then it would never change. It would always have to be like that. But the fact is, it is changing, and therefore there cannot be this permanent characteristic or a permanent identity of being a friend, enemy, or stranger. So when one frees oneself from grasping individuals as if their identity of friend, enemy, and stranger was abiding within them, and realize that it's an attitude that one projects on beings by depending upon changing circumstances, and that one has viewed them in different ways throughout one's countless lifetimes, then one decides, just a decision arises, a determination arises that this is the wrong way to view beings. It is inappropriate to view beings like that. And so an attitude of an equal view towards all of them arises. And when that equal view arises, then you try to sustain it. And that becomes a meditation of single-pointedness, where you cultivate an inner attitude or view, and then you sustain that as long as possible without forgetting it. And then when you lose that your concentration and get distracted, then you try to bring it back again, and you can bring it back through this analysis, and eventually this analysis becomes so familiar to you that it takes almost no words at all. You can just bring it back. You can even remember it without an analysis. You just remember that attitude, and then you continue to meditate on it, to familiarize your mind with it. So this equanimity provides a foundation. And, equanimity doesn't mean that you ignore the fact that there are some persons whom it's better to avoid, because they can create interferences and create problems. And even though one is maybe striving to be a bodhisattva and therefore this altruistic person who loves everyone like that, one has to temper that emotion with the intelligence that understands just how one can help, or even where one can't help right now. Like even the Buddha couldn't help everyone, and there were some persons who would ask him questions and he wouldn't say anything, because he knew no matter what he said, they would interpret it the wrong way, and would go away with even a worse attitude than they already had. So he didn't say anything. And yet there were other times when he proactively engaged someone and made an influence on them to improve themselves. So it very much depends upon your capability. And even the great Bodhisattva Shantideva, in his book, Engaging in the Path of the Bodhisattva, mentioned one time that you have to know your limits, because he said that there may occur times when you think you could be of help to others, but what may end up happening is they bring you down to their level rather than you bringing them up to your level. So you have to temper some of these emotions that we're trying to cultivate here with intelligence, and that's why even the whole concept of becoming a Buddha is important, because it recognizes that no matter how much you want to help, there's a limit to what another person can do for another person. And because each of us is our own creator of our future. And so no matter how powerful or how altruistic and well-meaning somebody is, there's a limit to what they can do to help somebody to become free from suffering and to achieve happiness, because it's that person is the creator. They have to decide, and it's based upon their intentions, their will to do something, and then doing the right thing, staying with it, and overcoming obstacles, etc. And we can help each other in the process, and the more skill and insight and wisdom and resources that one has, the more one will be able to help others. So that's something that's important to keep in mind. So by cultivating equanimity, we have this a foundation for developing these higher trainings in cultivating the bodhicitta. So there's all kinds of advantages in developing the bodhicitta. Number one, it's the doorway to the path to enlightenment. Without it, no action that one does will become a cause for Buddhahood. So right there, it's a great advantage. Also, even the Buddha, in order to impress his disciples of the benefits of this attitude, taught them in several different sutras, and he used many different examples. But for instance, he said that to his disciples, if a number of arhats, so these are fully liberated beings, equal to the number of grains of sand in the Ganges River, were to offer what did he say? Is we're to offer planetary systems full of jewels to the 3 jewels of refuge. Do you think that that would acquire much merit? And, this disciple says, oh yes, yes, it would acquire a great deal of merit. Because, when they think about the accumulation of merit, generosity is one way to accumulate merit, and the amount of merit that one accumulates depends upon one's state of mind, and if one has a pure state of mind, then one has great opportunity to create merit. And also, if one is practicing generosity, like making offerings to a very high object, then one can accumulate merit. So if it's the 3 jewels of refuge, it's very high objects, a great amount of merit could be accumulated. And if that's done by one person, how much more merit could be accumulated by the number of persons multiplied by the number of grains of sand in the Ganges River, and it starts to appear rather huge. And the Buddha said, he said, if a bodhisattva offers 1 spoon of food to a dog, they accumulate even more merit than that. And they just says, how can that be? How can that be? And he said, because the beneficiaries of the bodhisattva's deeds are the countless living beings. Countless. And the merit that they gain is multiplied by a countless, inconceivable number. And when they engage in an act of generosity, it's for the purpose of becoming a fully enlightened being, which will transform them into a perfect cause to bring about the liberation and ultimate happiness of all the countless living beings. So it's a huge amount of merit that's accumulated. And so by generating the bodhicitta, one has a means by which one can create an inconceivable amount of merit. Each moment one generates this bodhicitta state of mind. And because of that amount of merit, then one has this kind of inner fuel that will enable you to accomplish anything that you want. And also it fills you with so much goodness that one experiences very few interferences. So, and And no matter who one is, the Buddha once said that, he said that a bodhisattva who is a beggar on the streets is, and people might walk by that bodhisattva and not give them even the time of day. But he said, that bodhisattva is worthy of offering and prostrations by all the gods. So that would be something, here's a beggar on the street and people are walking by. And then, if we're in the Indian culture, then it would be, then let's say the great trinity of Brahma, Indra, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and we can add Indra too. They could appear in front of this beggar and prostrate and make offerings to them because of recognizing that beggar as being a bodhisattva. And he said, not only that, he said, but even the Buddhas will prostrate to that bodhisattva because they recognize that that bodhisattva is on a path to becoming a perfect cause for the welfare of all living beings. And of course, that's what the Buddhas are all about. They're trying to promote and achieve the welfare of all living beings. So here's somebody who's going to become like them. And he said also, it's like the crown prince in a kingdom. So the crown prince, even as an infant, has a higher place in the hierarchy of that society than the prime minister, who through knowledge and connections and skill and so on, enables the king to achieve everything that the king wants. So in terms of function, at a particular time, the prime minister is invaluable to the king, but this infant who can't even go to the bathroom by itself is still has a higher place in the hierarchy because that infant is going to become the king one day. So like that, this bodhisattva who has just cultivated this attitude, this spirit of enlightenment, is like that, becomes this the child of a Buddha, the scion of the Buddhas that will inherit the fully enlightened mind and engage in the enlightening activities of the bodhisattva, of the Buddhas. So incredible amount of merit is gained, and through that one can accomplish one's objectives, one's wishes come true, one becomes free of many hardships because of that merit that one has, and so on. And then even simple actions that one undertakes for the benefit of others become great causes of leading to enlightenment. So the bodhicitta is very worthy of cultivating in one's mind, and the methods of doing it are the 7-point cause and effect method. This method too depends upon having some conviction in former lifetimes. So the first step of that is to recognize that every being has once been one's mother. So it's not an easy view to take, but it's based upon the fact that one has had beginningless rebirths, so countless rebirths. So it's difficult to say that somebody has never been one's mother when there are an infinite number of possibilities where they could have been. So you take that possibility and you firm it into a view that each one has been my mother. And if they've been my mother once, they could have been my mother twice, 3 times, countless times, because there's no limit, no beginning to the number of rebirths that one has had. So then the reason why the mother is chosen is because people in general have a close relationship with their mother. If you don't have a close relationship with your mother, you choose somebody else, like your grandmother, your uncle. Generally, not your lover, because it just, because we have to protect our mind from attachment arising like that. So you choose somebody whom you don't have any kind of a sexual relationship with, and usually that's close relative, like one's mother that has benefited one so much. But like I say, if you have a bad relationship with the mother, then you choose somebody else that you have a good relationship with. Like many times when parents can't take care of a child, then in-laws take care of the child, such as the grandparents. So you choose one of them. And so this would be somebody that it's very easy to feel a heart connection to. So then you think about the kindnesses that this person has bestowed upon you, so that warm-hearted feeling towards them grows. So, like for instance, if it's the mother, then you think how she has given up her life for you. She could have aborted you. Instead, she took on the responsibility to have you and to raise you. And that's not an easy choice to make. And yet she made it for you. And then she had to do all of these things to ensure that you would grow well. And so, like, she would take various medicines, she would avoid certain kind of foods. When you were in the womb, she would take certain kinds of nutrients, vitamins, and all the time thinking, okay, I want my child to have good, strong bones. I'm going to take this calcium and all this kind of stuff. And even though she might have liked certain kinds of food, she thought, maybe this food is too spicy, and the baby might get burned by it in my belly, and because it's right next to my belly, and so on. So I'm going to avoid that. And in terms of movements, maybe the mother was like to engage in certain kinds of activities, but thought that maybe I better not. I usually like to go skiing, but if I fell while I'm pregnant, then I could hurt the baby, so I'm going to avoid that. So there were all these sacrifices that the mother made, even before she saw you, when you're developing in the womb, seeing a doctor, going to the gynecologist. It could be, the first time going to the gynecologist, and so having a complete stranger staring at your private parts like that. Yes, all these things that the mother has done for you. And then, preparing the husband, the father, making sure that the father has a good job, for instance, encouraging him to get a better job if he's not making enough. All of this, all for your sake. And training him, getting him ready. Like when you have to go to the hospital, then he has to, get you there quickly and all of this kind of thing. So then when you do go to the hospital, great pain. She has to endure incredible pain. And even the thought that she might die in the process can arise. But the main concern is often for you and not her sake. There was a friend of mine who was, when he was born, his head was rather large, and she had a hard time getting him out, and the doctors thinking that they might have to crush the skull, but she refused to let that happen, and endured a great amount of pain, and she finally came out like that. And of course, when you look at an infant when it's first born, and I remember my sister sharing photos of her child. Only a mother could love that sight. So here's this thing that she's made so many sacrifices for over 9 months, right? And then has caused incredible amount of pain. And then is not a very handsome sight, but for the mother, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, right? And just takes it and hugs it and loves it, and has all kinds of plans and Gucci-gooing and all this kind of thing. And then her job isn't done. I mean, she has to do all this work for the child because it's totally helpless, and human beings are helpless for a very long time. So, and having to teach us how to even wipe our bum, and how to use a knife and fork, and then how to speak, and how to be polite among others. Meanwhile, all this time, she's your PR manager. She's saying all kinds of, oh, so intelligent, giving all this, PR, so that when one goes into the world, everybody has such a high view of oneself because of the good things that she said. And, even when one grows up and becomes, independent and is living on one's own, often the mother, when they're thinking about moving someplace, they'll think, she's not uncommon for her to think about having a house to live in where there's an extra room, just in case you come and visit. Like that, in case you might need help, and things like that. So there was always someplace, some refuge for you. So that's way of thinking, like getting right into the details of thinking in that way, so that this heartfelt warmth arises towards her. And then one expands it to include everyone else, because they have also been one's mother, like that, countless times. So like the Bodhisattvas have said that, Shantideva, he said that the amount of milk that one has sucked from one's mother's breasts would fill up all the oceans and still overflow, like that, because of former lifetimes. So one expands that view towards all living beings, this warm-hearted feeling towards them. And so that's and as you expand that, you're thinking, well, I would like to give back to them, because that's just the natural thought that comes to try to reciprocate this the benefit that one has received. And so this thought then becomes the thought of loving kindness, which is wanting beings to be happy. Wanting beings to be happy. So this love for all these living beings arises in one's mind. And then when you think about, well, what do they need? Well, when you look, you see that they're experiencing many, many difficulties. And it seems like they're experiencing more difficulties than they're actually enjoying their lives. And these difficulties can be physical difficulties, mental difficulties, emotional difficulties, all these things that are causing them to experience problems in their own life. There's so much suffering that when people whom you love, you see them in some state of suffering, then naturally compassion arises. So one wants to free them from that suffering. One's interest that initially came from this attitude of loving kindness, wanting them to be happy. Well, the first thing one has to do is to free them from their suffering. So this is compassion, and you let that rise within you, even sustaining it. And then, the thought, well, there's countless beings experiencing suffering, all kinds of suffering right now, but of course they're also involved in this vicious circle of uncontrolled death and rebirth. They want to be happy, but they're engaged in activities that are going to cause them unhappiness. So it's like somebody who is in a state of confusion, and out of their great fear, they're running to avoid some terrible storm or whatever, but they're running in the direction of a cliff, and they don't even see it because of their confusion. And it just causes, when you have an image like that in your mind, especially this mother whom you love, you just want to reach out and grab her and stop her from going off the cliff. So it's that kind of compassion. And you have to let that compassion grow to the point where you're going to take personal responsibility. So compassion, it's a state of mind, so it has, levels. And like one level is that it's just for a limited group that you have compassion for. Well, that can be expanded. Here we found a reason to expand it because all living beings have been one's mother, so they've all been kind. Even in the animal realm, we see how mothers are kind to their children. So countless benefits one is derived from them, and so this love towards all living beings. Then another level of compassion is what you're willing to do. Is your willingness limited to just wishing that they would be free from their problem? Or are you willing to take some action? So then it can expand to the point of taking some action. Well, what kind of action? Is it the action like just a prayer? Well, a prayer is not insignificant. It's like, in some way, it's like calling 911. If you can't help, maybe the fire department can help, right? So it's some action. But then it can come to the point where you take personal responsibility. It's not something that you can turn your back on. You are going to take responsibility to ensure that these beings are going to become free from suffering. This is regarded as an unusual attitude. It's also referred to as great compassion. But it's all you can do. You can't not do it because compassion forces this attitude on you. Because there's no way you can turn your back on anyone. There's no way that you can become disinterested in anyone. So you take personal responsibility, and then of course you look at yourself and say, well, I can't even liberate myself. How am I going to liberate all living beings from their suffering? And then one thinks, but a Buddha has not only liberated themselves, the Buddhas have created the ability to be in constant contact with all living beings, spontaneously knowing in every moment what that person could do to advance from suffering towards happiness, and spontaneously encouraging the beings in whatever way to take a step in that direction. And if the person doesn't, then in the next moment, a new scenario the Buddha is aware of without any reluctance, without any without any discouragement, without being upset or frustrated. This thus continues in each moment to know what a person can do at that point for their path all the way to enlightenment, and engaging spontaneously, effortlessly in to encourage the person to go in that direction. All this happening continuously until all living beings achieve supreme enlightenment. So that's enlightening activity. And oneself can achieve that. Oneself can become a Buddha. All Buddhas, and there have been innumerable ones, were just like oneself. No different. And they achieved supreme Buddhahood, so you can as well. We all have a mind, and the mind functions to know. It functions to know objects. So it has the potential to know everything. It just has to be released from all of these kind of barriers that, like misconceptions, that cause us to hallucinate. So we know hallucinations and not even know that they are hallucinations. So there are these misconceptions that hold back this natural genius that we possess. And there are other emotions that come from that basic ignorance that cloud our views and direct us towards some things rather than other things. So, and without those disturbing, limiting attitudes, the mind can expand to its full genius to know whatever exists, and to know it with the guiding principle of compassion that shows what's worth knowing and how to make knowledge valuable, to know the path to enlightenment for each and every living being at every moment. Like that. One can do that. And because one has more than one lifetime to perfect such qualities, it can be done. So, at that point, something kind of wonderful happens. One conceives of the thought of becoming a Buddha for the welfare of all living beings. And that's the bodhicitta. So that thought, when it arises from this effort of contemplating in the way that I've described, that 7-point cause and effect method. And when the bodhicitta arises, then you try to hold it and sustain it with concentration, familiarizing your mind with it as much as possible. And when your mind can no longer hold on to the object, then you go back to the analysis, so it arises again, and then you hold it. And you continue to do this so that just through the power of familiarity, the bodhicitta arises effortlessly within you, just becomes the way you are through the power of familiarity. It's like some people, like numbers. When we were children, numbers might have been difficult. But if you're adding and subtracting every day, you can do it easily, no problem. So like that's the power of familiarity. There's some prayers, like I recited the bodhicitta prayer. at the beginning of the session. Once I had to learn that with effort, because Tibetan is not my native language, but if somebody asks me to do it, I can just do it, because through the power of familiarity. So likewise, the bodhicitta arises in the mind through the power of familiarity. When it does so effortlessly, at that moment, you're a bodhisattva. That's the definition of the bodhisattva, when the bodhicitta effortlessly arises in one's mind. So you can see that it's not far away from us, developing effortless bodhicitta, because one has these causes that it arises with effort, but it arises. And once it arises, the power of familiarity through concentration, sustaining that attitude, is what will eventually cause it to arise effortlessly. So then, once you know the technique, it's only a question of using it, and time. It takes time to grow it. So that's so it means, it's not far away. And once you achieve the effortless bodhicitta, then you engage in the activities of the path. The engaging bodhicitta is where you engage in, like the 6 perfections. Perfection of generosity, patience, morality, effort, meditation, and wisdom. And depending upon one's skill in engaging in those 6 perfections with the bodhicitta motivation, then that is all a factor of how quickly one achieves Buddhahood. Like, for instance, once one generates the bodhicitta, then you may cultivate a special type of concentration, single-pointedness of concentration. Oftentimes persons, develop single-pointed concentration just in the effort of sustaining the bodhicitta, so that they get the power of familiarity as quickly as possible. But then they'll use their concentration to analyze how things actually exist in order to overcome this fundamental ignorance, which is the main closer of one's mind and causes all the other emotional disturbances. So one has to remedy that, and one remedies it through wisdom. And then when one is able to cultivate wisdom, then eventually insight arises, and one can dispel all of the the seeds of ignorance and so on. And when one engages in actions like generosity, morality, and so forth with wisdom, that's what gives them the title perfections, the 6 perfections. There's another perfection was kind of the original translation in English that was used, but a more literal translation would be transcendence. So you transcend generosity, or transcendent generosity, transcendent morality, transcendent patience, transcendent effort, transcendent concentration, transcendent wisdom. So it transcends the ordinary view of oneself, others, and so on. But we'll talk more about that the next time. So the other method of cultivating bodhicitta is the exchange of self with others. And it begins with cultivating an attitude that's has a similar name of equanimity, but it's viewing all beings as being alike, like you. They're all like you. And when we look at each other, we of course see all the differences that exist. Some are male, some are females, some are tall, some are short, some are different shapes, colors and all this kind of thing. All of that appears to us. And then there are those whom we know that there's all of that, the history one has with them. And when one looks at oneself, it's like a whole library appears to one's mind of, depths of character and experience and so on. Well, that's the same with everybody else, whom unfortunately we're only touching the superficial part of them. That's the aspect that appears in our mind, is what comes through the senses. But for cultivating the equality of self and others, you focus on the characteristic that everyone is like myself in wanting to be happy and to be free from suffering. That is the characteristic that one focuses on. So first of all, one has to say, well, does everybody want to be happy and to be free from suffering? So what about masochists? And here you have to differentiate between the wish to be happy and to be free from suffering and the method that persons use to accomplish that goal. The methods are infinite, and they're not always appropriate. They don't always work. But nonetheless, everyone wants to be happy and to be free from suffering. If one were to do, if it was capable of doing a transplant of this attitude, like my attitude would be transplanted in you, and your wish to be happy and to be free from suffering would be transplanted into me. When you wake up from the operation, the first thing you would notice is that nothing had changed. It's the same. Everybody equally wants to be happy and to be free from suffering. So that's what one has to focus on. And then you sustain that. You just generate that towards everyone. Everyone wants to be happy and to be free from suffering, just like myself. And you have to, this is not something that you only do in a meditation session. You have to practice this, during the day. And so this person is just like me. And you end up, it brings you closer to other beings. Like, for instance, there's sometimes people, well, it's well known that public speaking is a cause of fear. But if you have this attitude that views other beings as being just like yourself and wanting to be happy and to be free from suffering, the audience is not as fearful because you have this thing in common, and it's not superficial. This wish to be happy and to be free from suffering is deep within us. It's like at the very core of our being. So you're sharing a core experience with all these beings. And so then when you speak, you'll be speaking from this wish that all of these beings are free from suffering and experience happiness, just like oneself would like that. The next step is to contemplate the disadvantages of selfishness. So selfishness, or egoism, is the opposite of altruism, and it views one's own happiness as being more important than everybody else's. So right away we see there's a contradiction here, that if everybody equally wants to be happy and to be free from suffering, this egoistic attitude of viewing one's own happiness as more important than others is unrealistic. It's a superimposition. It's like a superstition. It's something that you've heaped on top of reality that obscures the reality in itself. It's an obscuration. And what we're trying to do with our life is trying to eliminate obscurations, trying to see things as they are so that we can know how to act. So it's an obstacle to viewing things according to their reality. So, and then you think about it, this. So right away, it's opposite to what I've been thinking about, of how all beings equally want to be happy, to be free from suffering. And so already it's something negative because it's obscuring a fact. Number two, look at all the problems that this attitude creates. It's what causes a schism between oneself and others. And that schism can be manifested in something simple but uncomfortable, like loneliness, to every single war that's ever existed comes about through that attitude. All the sufferings in the past that one has had, all the potential sufferings in the future that one may experience, all arise, the Buddha said, from the 10 non-virtuous actions, like killing, stealing, sexual violence, lying, divisiveness, harsh speech, useless speech, covetousness, malice, wrong views. They can all be laid at the feet of selfishness. Selfishness puts one's own happiness as more important than others, and therefore one can justify killing them, robbing from them, lying to them, whatever. And all of those actions produce the negative karma that causes all the lower rebirths, and even if reborn in an upper rebirth, will cause the various sufferings that one experiences there. So that's the thing that's to blame. If you ever have something go wrong and this thought arises in your mind, says, why me? Says, oh, I know why. Because of selfishness. I've been selfish in the past, and that has motivated me to do some action, and now I'm experiencing the result of that action. It could have been an action not necessarily in this lifetime, something in the past life. But still, because of the continuity of mind, I'm getting the result of that action. So like that, think about the disadvantages of selfishness, egoism. And then think of the advantages of altruism, the attitude of cherishing the happiness of others more than oneself. And if one cherishes the happiness of others more than oneself, then that becomes your primary focus. And automatically, you'll not engage in the 10 non-virtuous actions. You'll be engaged in the opposite of them. You'll be protecting life, protecting the possessions of others. Kindness will flow from one. Not deceiving others with one's speech, but telling the truth, and just speaking in kind ways, and in ways that are beneficial, and so on. Trying to cultivate one's qualities, one's skills, so that one can be an asset for other living beings. So every good quality that one has, one could say, comes from those moments when one has cherished others more than oneself. And automatically benefits come from that. Like, you get surrounded by friends. Even if you don't want friends, you get friends. Like that, because it's just natural. People are gravitated towards you because for you, they're your love. You exist in order to benefit them, like that. So altruism is incredible benefits. So then you make a decision. Okay, I am going to cultivate this altruism, and I'm going to eliminate egoism. And there's a method of doing this called exchanging self with others. And the exchange of self from others, or exchanging self with others, is basically, it's the golden rule. It's like the golden rule is treating others like yourself, right? But here is, you really are going to do that. You're going to in the past, one might have thought of, if somebody had happiness and had resources for happiness, then you might have thought, well, I want to get those resources for me because I want to be happy. And instead of, if somebody comes up and asks you for something, says, no, I'm keeping these resources for myself. So to overcome that, you think about giving your resources to others and taking their problems on yourself, like that. Because that's what compassion does, right? Compassion wants to free other beings from their suffering, so they get involved. A compassionate person gets involved. They didn't have to, but it just makes them. Compassion makes them get involved. So it's an exchange of self with others. And it's an attitude, but there's also meditations that can be done, like for instance, you can imagine different sufferings that are going on, and then you imagine that is in the form of like smoke, pollution, arising from them, and you inhale it, taking it right inside in the breath. And imagine that this cloud shoots out a bolt of lightning to this egoistic, granite-hard mountain in your heart, and smashes it to smithereens. And then as you exhale, you imagine that all of your happiness, your resources for happiness, go out to all these living beings, giving them happiness, manifesting in ways that free them from their problems and give them happiness. Now, it's hard to do with consecutive breaths, right? So you might spend some time with the inhalation thing and save the visualization of the exhalation till later. And then later, after you've done this, then you put your emphasis on giving your resources to them, and you imagine it, it doesn't matter what people want, whatever. If they want cars, you imagine them having cars. You just imagine them driving them to Dharma centers. And then they study teachings, and they practice, and then they become more and more. They become Buddhas eventually. You can imagine them becoming Buddhas like that. But this is the exchange of self with others. And the fundamental thing of exchanging self with others means that you exchange the attitude that you had towards yourself of regarding yourself as most important, and you exchange that with others. So now others you regard as most important. And the attitude that you had towards others, which are using others for your welfare, you exchange that, where you use yourself for others' welfare. That's the exchange of self with others. And this meditation is you're like giving all of your happiness and resources for happiness in the form of light or whatever on your breath as you're exhaling and sending it out. And then imagine that they all become fully enlightened, experiencing perfect happiness. That's a meditation. And at the end of the meditation, you think, well, this has just been imagination. I really have to make this happen. How can I really make this happen? The only way I can really make this happen is by becoming a fully enlightened being. I must become a fully enlightened being for the sake of all living beings. So then, here's the bodhicitta arising again. And then you sustain that for as long as possible. You continue to engage in this practice as many times as you can, and eventually through the power of familiarity, the bodhicitta will arise effortlessly within you, and you're a bodhisattva. Okay, so we've just run out of time. Is that fairly clear, what I've talked about? Okay. So if you have heard anything today that you think was useful and you might be able to put into practice, then please don't forget it, and practice it as quickly as you can. So that will help you not to forget it, and you can begin cultivating the power of familiarity. And Buddhahood, your future Buddhahood starts to approach you like a train, quickly on its way. So thank you very much. So next week, right?
Yes, next week's our last class.
Okay. Look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.